didn't, and that's fine. Did you
Oh,
have a
I
chance
did
to
watch your
rewatch?
show. I watched your show.
Did you watch The Old Man in the Cave again? I'm assuming you didn't.
Yes, I did both. Yeah,
Oh, you did? Okay, cool.
I've got the Twilight Zone on. We're
You you got
streaming.
the Blu-ray box set?
I've got it on my like Apple
All right,
TV. I
cool,
bought it.
cool. Sorry. I was listening to both. Suddenly the video started playing at the same time that we were talking about. Yeah, so why don't you just tell me, because you rewatched The Old Man in the Cave, and I've heard a lot of people, like I mentioned in the video, a lot of people don't like it, and I can understand why. When I first saw it, I loved it, and I immediately got all the things that were kind of off about it, but I was like, yeah, but the Twilight Zone is so simplistic anyway that to me, none of those things bothered me. By the way, can you hear my fan? I want to make sure it's not too loud.
Not to me.
Okay, cool.
I can't hear
Um,
anything.
okay, so yes, that might just be
Yeah.
you, but we'll just try to make sure. So if anybody in the chat can tell me, I'm not in the chat currently, but I'll get there in a second. Yeah, so what did you think when you first saw the episode, and what did you think in rewatching the episode? And it's okay if it's all negative because I just like discussion. So
Sure. Well, let's remember that every audience is bringing something new to the engagement, and that might be like you are sitting there in Nepal, and you grew up in Nepal, and there's this American TV show you're watching called The Twilight Zone in 2020, and you're
right,
17 years old, and you're a young woman who's interested in being a physics professor. You're bringing that to the engagement. Then you might be me living in
right,
suburban America in, I think it was early 70s when I first watched this TV show called The Twilight Zone. Remember, the show was on in the early 60s. So people were engaging it in the early 60s. And then there was new generations, including today, like you, and then even much younger people. If you look at the Twilight Zone social media, Facebook pages, I'm especially lurking and posting sometimes in the Twilight Zone Reddit. There's
right.
obviously a lot of very young people, like 18, who have watched an episode of the Twilight Zone for the first time. Some of my students, they've watched it for the first time. They heard about it, or maybe they watched an episode when they were 14 or something. An older brother was watching. Hey, you should watch this. So everybody's bringing something new, is my point. When the show first aired in the 1960s, television was only about maybe 15 years old or so. Television, what we call television, over the air broadcast television, this is before cable, or cable actually came pretty early, but like most people were watching a television set with rabbit ears. People are going to have to go and look that up on Wikipedia to see what I mean, or ask ChatGPT what rabbit ears are, but antennae. So the 60s science fiction on television, a lot of themes and ideas that appeared in The Twilight Zone, Star Trek, some of those 60s science fiction fantasy shows were new to television, but they were not new necessarily to science fiction or even to fiction. And I'm old enough, and I've always been a sci-fi fantasy, especially sci-fi fanatic, that I've been watching and reading science fiction for a long time. So I've read a lot of the science fiction of the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And the themes of many Twilight Zones would have been very familiar to sci-fi fans, sci-fi buffs, sci-fi writers there. That's not saying Rod Serling wasn't original and didn't tell stories that he interpreted originally, and his writers and his directors, but people would not have been shocked at the idea, like I mean, they would, the big reveal. I mean, I guess we're spoiling what a
Well,
60-year-old thing, right?
it's fine to spoil, but I just want to add real quick with what you're talking about. It's like when Rod Serling started the show, he was always an avid reader of these things, but when he started the show, he actually talked to Ray Bradbury, and Ray Bradbury literally said, "Here's a shelf full of authors and books.
Yes.
These are the people you want to go to." And many of those people he did go to, and so there's good reason for it to be reminiscent of the short fiction in particular, but also just science fiction novels of the day. Sorry to interrupt you there, but yeah, I
Right,
wanted to
right. And
go there.
and I'm gonna throw off a couple of names now. Great, these are science fiction grandmasters, 1940s, 1950s, some of them well known today. Jack Williamson, not as well known, but certainly a great, old time author, 1947, in astounding science fiction, he writes a story that I remember reading and have reread over the years called With Folded Hands. And I'm not going to give away the spoiler, but it's the theme of a society is eventually taken over by robots who do everything for us and think for us because they can't trust us to make the right decisions. Okay, does that
Right.
sound familiar? I mean, that's where we seem to be heading with AI. 1947. Isaac Asimov has like 5 or 6 stories with the themes of human beings either delegate or robots take over from us because we can't be trusted to make good
Right.
decisions
We're
ourselves.
imperfect.
Yeah, it's and obviously there are stories go back to Colossus, the Forbin Project movie, and then Terminator. There are movies where a militia and oh yes, the famous Harlan Ellison short story "I Have No Mouth but I Must Scream."
Mm, that's
There
the one
are
a lot of people think of. Yeah.
malevolent robot computer AIs that take over for malevolent purposes. But then in these other stories, and I'm mentioning Asimov and Williamson and like 50 others, sometimes it's benevolent dictatorship.
Right.
But a true benevolent dictatorship where they say like, you humans, you're just too dumb, you're too self-destructive, you fight wars, you cause disease, you hurt each other. We'll just
Right.
take care of everything, and you just stay out of governance.
Right. So I wanted to say real quick. So
Yeah.
I had another 10 minutes in the video that I cut just because it was taking me too long. I'm getting married this month and I've been super busy. And so I just cut it. And the other 10 minutes was, I think you can, and I don't know if Rod Serling intended this because, and that's one of the reasons I
Mark,
cut it
I'm
because
sorry
I
to
felt,
interrupt, but I think we need to clarify for our viewers nowadays, you are marrying a human, right? That's
yes, I
correct.
am marrying a human being, not an AI waifu, if that's what anyone is wondering, or a robot of any kind. Robots are great. Don't get me wrong. I'm not bigoted against robots or human robot relationships. You do what you want to do, but that's not what I do. I'm marrying a human. And the thing, real quick, if I can divert, since you asked that, getting married is a lot. It's. I thought we could do a cheap version, but boy, is it expensive, and boy, is it a lot. So it's taken a lot
This
more
is why you
away
need to
from the
turn it over to the AI and the singularity, and humans cannot be allowed
for
to
real,
do these
for real,
things, right? So,
for real. I actually think that, but what you're talking about, AI being a positive thing and everything. It's interesting because it's like we can't think that anymore. It's like every version that we see of it now has to be a negative version because of what we've seen it in the real world, which I want to stress, and I think you're aware too, it's not actual AI. Like what we see these days that they call AI, it's is it correct in saying it's machine learning?
well, yeah, I mean, that's an entire great conversation in the
Yeah,
episode.
yeah.
Okay, so I mean, I hope people have watched your great
Yeah, spoiler
analysis
talk.
video. Yeah,
I just added while you were
yeah,
talking, I edited the title so it says spoilers. So spoiler
yeah,
talk. If you haven't seen The Old Man in the Cave, we're going to spoil the ending of The Old Man in the Cave. Go ahead, Professor.
yeah. The old man in the cave who has benevolently been telling the people in this post-apocalyptic society. It's a small town. There's only a few people there. We could talk about the logistics of that. How long are they
Mhm,
going to
mhm.
last? It doesn't look like there's.
There's no children.
Yeah, I mean it. Um, I just reread a wonderful novel by another sort of lost great grandmaster, Brian Aldiss, and one of the
Mm,
great post-apocalyptic novels which anticipated the film Children of Men, was Graybeard by Brian Aldiss. It's a society where there's been an accident that led to war with radiation. But anyway, the radiation sterilized most of humanity. So
right.
the generations are getting older and older. The youngest people are in their 50s. This is not a happy society. This is not a paradise or utopia. This village, right? Where
Right.
it's post-war, post something, post disaster, and an old man is going into a cave and coming back with messages from an old man in the cave
Right.
about what the people should do to stay alive. And so far, at least for the small group of people we see, it seems to be working, right? And then
Right.
uh, Charles Coburn, I'm sorry,
James
I'm
Coburn.
blanking. James Coburn. Yeah, gosh.
Yeah.
James Coburn comes in representing, and you analyze this all well. I mean, is he on his own? Is he actually representing like a military, like the
Let's talk about
forces of
that for one
order?
second.
Yeah,
Let's talk about that for one
yeah.
second. Do you think that he is representing a government or what? What's your theory there?
Uh, that's a good question. I assumed that this was all a con job.
Yeah.
He had a bunch of guys. He came off as he probably had been military, but
He
this
he
is
comes off as
post
educated.
collapse, right? Like
Yeah.
yeah,
So
he comes off as like I don't actually think he comes off as an officer.
no, and
He
I
comes off as somebody who was like a supply sergeant or something. I
so
mean,
so I think it's
but he
possible he's
understood the way the military worked.
yes. I think it's possible that he is at least military. Excuse me. I think it's possible that he is at least military, but I think it's possible he's not military too. Someone in the comments pointed out that their like lapel buttons were not done, and like first of all, he's lying. He's definitely lying. I agree with you. He's got to be lying because the second, I'm sorry, my throat. The second he says it, he goes, which is a dead giveaway that he's lying because he doesn't want to look him straight in the eye when he says it. So I'm glad you think that too. It does seem to me that they're lying about the whole thing. And the thing about it is that even if they were telling the truth, it wouldn't make much difference to me. And that's why the analysis didn't change much because yeah, I don't know. But yeah, I thought that was interesting. He shows up
Yeah,
in the town. It's good. Yeah.
and and if you think about it, like his ambition as a dictator is pretty small. I mean, he's going to take over a community of 12 people and become the
Yes.
absolute ruler of 12 people. In
Yes.
the grand scheme of dictators and conquerors, that's
Yes.
pretty small. I
It's
mean, maybe
yeah.
this is like the nucleus of something bigger that he wants to like build an empire, but it looks like they're just scroungers, they're scavengers, and they see a community that seems to be doing okay, and they want to take it over. And there doesn't seem to be any opposition. It's not like there's any nobody brandishes a gun and challenges him. In
Right.
fact, he takes over the community pretty easily just with like
It's
arguing,
immediately.
Yeah.
If it it's interesting actually because he goes to great lengths to win their hearts and minds, even though he could easily just overthrow power them, which is another thing. I think they're out of bullets in the rifles. I don't think they have any ammunition in the rifles because otherwise they probably would have just said, do what we say or we'll shoot you. I think only the sidearms have bullets. And the only reason I think they have them is because they shot one off when they were drinking the booze. But I think it's all, like you're saying, it's all a game of intimidation and conning and posturing. And the thing is, these people, so we'll continue with the synopsis, but these people are the perfect people to take over the town. The town is completely aimless, and nobody in it wants to take any responsibility for anything. So when they show up, you're like, well, if it wasn't for the old man in the cave, they should be in charge of the town.
Yeah, we've gone back to this a couple of times with the episode 2 that we
Yeah.
analyzed about there's a central logistical problem in a lot of post-apocalyptic fiction,
Hmm.
television, and movies, which is that you can understand how for a couple of years, maybe a couple of decades, if the population actually crashes and you've got all the resources of Los Angeles
Right.
or Texas at your disposal, you can live off of canned and dried and, water bottles for a long time, right? But
Absolutely.
eventually, if you want to have a sustainable population and you want to have something approaching civilization and laundry,
Yeah.
and like medical care, you have to build an agricultural civilization. And that means large fields, herds, and security and phosphates. I mean, you got to build agricultural civilization again, and that's hard. And so often it's just not depicted. Like people just stand around having meetings, whereas in reality they would be in the fields, hoeing and cutting the wheat and herding the cows and sheep for 10 hours a day at least,
Right.
right? So,
Right.
how these, again, Twilight Zone tends to have these little capsule situations, and we should never criticize it for it not being completely fleshed out. They had what,
Right.
25 minutes, 26 minutes. They
Yeah.
just want to tell a story with a moral and a twist
Hmm.
in a short time.
And
And
that's
of
kind
course,
of
they can't fill
background.
out all the details.
The town and the logic of the town is kind of background, and the main focus is definitely the old man and the soldiers. But you're right, the logistics of everything, if you were to try to take it seriously, you'd have a problem, and that's why I just don't do that. There are some episodes where I do think that's a problem. I just don't think it's a problem in this one. But
Yeah,
anyway, so they show up in town to get through it. They show up in town and they're like, "Hey, we're here from the government." And he basically just the way he acts is just like, "I'm in charge. Give me a bed. Give us some food." And Goldsmith, who has I didn't mention this in the video, but he has old man makeup on, so he's supposed to be like an old man too. He's like, yeah, no, we don't do that. You guys have shown up here before. We've had other soldiers show up here before, and they've all done the same thing. So we'll give you food and everything, but then you have to leave." And then he does this great thing, which I wasn't able to show the whole clip because I don't want to get copyright strike. But he says, uh, unofficially, you can be in charge, and we'll work. I showed that part, but he says it's unofficial, and he goes, this part's official, and then he punches him or he backhands him, and he gets to the ground, and he just threatens him full on in front of the town, and the town's just like, and they're not sure what to do because they're all weak and they can't do anything. And it's like, and this is again why the fact that they have guns is interesting because they don't fire, they don't. But after that, he tells them about the old man in the cave, who tells the town information, gives the town information basically to live. They go back there. It's a metal door. He can't get into the metal door. This is a criticism I can have of the episode. Structurally, it's not quite right. If I was rewriting, if I was doing a remake, then the moment when the people finally give up and eat the cans would be after the ending. But it's fine. I don't hate it because maybe as a writer he's thinking, well, you need time for eating it to set in. But anyway, so after they come back from the cave, even though Major French has failed to get into the cave, he convinces the people to start eating the cans, which is believable because they're starving. Jason joins in as well. And then the guy Goldsmith is like, this is horrible. You've ruined the whole town. And he literally just gets mad. I kind of talk about it in the video briefly. He literally just gets mad that Goldsmith is still on about the old man. And that's one of the reasons why the religious interpretation, I think, is on, because makes sense. Because he's just like, he is so arrogantly angry that this guy is giving so much authority to the old man that he goes back. This time they convince Goldsmith to open it. There's like a switch in a rock. They open it, they go in. It's a computer. It's a pre-war, pre-bomb computer that works perfectly. Someone in the comments noted that they had nuclear batteries back then. So it is entirely possible that this thing operates on a nuclear battery.
yeah. I think the Twilight Zone did not operate on that level
Yeah,
of thinking through details. You
it's not
know,
a science fiction
when
story,
they
as I
were in the
said.
writers' room, I mean, look, when I saw this in 1970, and
Mhm.
I talked about it to my friends at school the next day, I think one of them said, "So what did they have a lot of batteries or something like that?" I mean, yeah, I mean
Yeah, yeah.
those kind of flaws. I mean, I wouldn't even call them plot holes. It just the
Well, yeah, because
Twilight Zone
again,
didn't focus on those kind of
mhm,
logistical finer details to get to the
right,
story that they
right.
wanted to tell. And it
The
was
point
because
is the
those
machine
stories were so
works,
interesting that it wasn't as important to us, to
right?
work through that.
Also, just real quick, and I'm sure you can back this up. Back then, there was this weird sense that like robots and machinery were like they're not like people. They can be around forever. There was like more of a sense of indestructibility because people didn't own home computers yet, right?
I, this was an era before, I mean, we had radios that were battery operated. And actually, there was the first small television, black and white TV sets that were
Right.
battery operated. But I
So cool.
don't think, and flashlights, so human beings were used to battery operated things. But if you look at a lot of the robots in science fiction, like Robbie the Robot in Forbidden
Right.
Planet and things like that, they just seem to keep going forever,
Yeah,
it wasn't today where like, man, you've got your Prius and oh my God, I got 30 miles left and there's no, no working charging stations, I'm going to die.
exactly.
There was, just people didn't think about that, okay, first of all, everything was assumed to become nuclear. We had nuclear submarines by then. The
Right,
United States had begun a nuclear navy. Of course, we still have part of our Navy, aircraft carriers, submarines that are nuclear powered. Of course, they have a shelf life too. They're not
right,
forever. But it just, again, it wasn't something like, I don't think the audience in 1960s something were going like, wait a minute, it doesn't make any sense. Also, let's face it, computers back then, you couldn't have that kind of a conversation. Didn't have the large language learning model that you're talking
right.
about today, where if I ask ChatGPT, what is the shelf life of LeSueur peas? What is
Yes.
the shelf life of frozen beef? It would, I mean, it might give me a good answer. It might give me hallucinations. I don't know. But
Well, there's one of those. I'm sure one of
ChatGPT
those guys
could
doesn't write.
serve as the old man in the cave
Right.
today.
Well, the version that I thought would be funny, and I did this in a D&D campaign for my nephews and niece once, was Alexa was the
Oh,
old
yeah.
man in the cave, and they were like, I called it something else, but they were like, "Oh, great one, tell us what to do," and it was or they said something, and it was just like Gangnam Style by this whatever, and then it would just play the song. Well, boom, Gangnam, I just made a joke out of it because if you use our modern thing, it is kind of a joke. But I think in the '60s, um, the idea of a computer doing that would be an incredible notion. We didn't have there was nothing to compare it to, like you're saying, except for the big computers they had at like IBM and stuff like
Right.
that.
But science fiction writers, including the ones that Rod Serling would have read and
Mhm.
people like Ray Bradbury would have talked to him about, had fully thought through the idea. I mean, it's not that crazy an extrapolation. You have going back, Rossum's Universal Robots, this Czech play
Yeah, yeah,
about a robot uprising, is
right,
written in the 1920s. So
right,
it's not, I mean, it wasn't that fantastic a jump to go like, oh, we can have machines and they can have intelligence that is the equal of humans and greater. That was already worked out. It's
that
the
was
only
already
question is,
imagined.
yeah, yeah. So for a television audience, that wouldn't have been like completely insane. It was a nice twist that the
Right,
old man in the cave is a computer, but it wouldn't have been implausible, and people wouldn't have gone like, "That's crazy. How could a computer?"
right. And
Yeah,
well, just sorry to interrupt.
yeah,
To me, the reason I loved the episode when I first saw it was not that the old man was a computer. It was literally, and to me, the ending wasn't that he's a computer. To me, the ending is they destroy the computer and then they all die. And to me, that was the ending, and I loved it. I just thought it was so cynical and it was so dead on. That's how stupid. Another interpretation I was going to throw in here very quickly in the video and I cut out was it's about science. It's about losing faith in science and the way that because ordinary people can't really understand science. Only scientists can really explain most scientific concepts, and it's almost like a priesthood passing down, or people reading the Vulgate and like I don't read the Bible, they read the Bible. It's almost like that. And so I was going to throw that in there. I cut that out. But the one I wanted to talk with you about and get your take on, and again, I didn't use this one because it was too long, and also because I felt that Rod Serling probably didn't intend this. What if the computer represents liberal technocracy? And for those of you who don't understand what that means, what I mean by that is a type of governance or government which is conscious to like responsibilities that it has about the planet and about having a good society, but it's not conscious and it doesn't care about the average citizen's wishes, and it deliberately ignores those. That's what a technocracy, our liberal technocracy, is described as being. And Major French is a populist that comes in and says, I offer you stuff. And that's what the cans represent is clientelism, which is a concept that a lot of people probably aren't familiar with. Basically, it's the dark side of the welfare state. It's like, I'll give you welfare, but only if you are loyal to me. And so that was another interpretation that I was going to go with. And I was like, you know what? One, 10 minutes too long. Two, too much of a stretch. Three, too much to explain. So I cut that one completely. What do you think of that interpretation?
Well, let's go back to the actual society we see here, right?
Right.
Again, the Twilight Zone doesn't fill out, just like in that episode 2, you really don't know what's going on 60
No idea.
towns to the east, right? So, but what we're
Right.
seeing here, these people are dying anyway.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they're all middle-aged. There's no kids.
They're starving. Yeah.
They're hungry. Their society is not a utopia.
Right.
Major French is one of those villains who kind of sort of have a point,
Yeah.
which is like, what is the point? Like, are you guys going to like eke out survival for another couple of years
Exactly.
wearing your, 20th century clothing and heels,
And,
pumps or whatever, and then
and
what? I mean, what is the long range plan? You
yeah.
might as well just have a party and
And he
die. I
has a
mean, he didn't quite say that, but I think that he represents not quite hedonism, but a sort of fin de siècle attitude of like the world is dying anyway. We
right.
might as well have our last weeks, months, years
Right.
do whatever we want, right?
Right.
And there's been a lot of societies which have faced disaster, which have acted like that. Like
Right.
if a meteor were heading towards the Earth, which have been in a lot of movies and a lot of books or something like that,
Right.
some people will probably get more religious. Other people will go out and party like it's the end of the
Right.
world. And
Right.
so
Yeah,
Major French
exactly.
comes along, and his ideology to me is just, I mean, he says he wants to be in power, but he's not an idiot. He's only going to be in power for like what, 6 months?
Yeah, exactly.
And
It's
then they'll
I
move
think he just wants
on,
to suck he wants to suck every resource he can out of this town and
Yeah.
move on.
Yeah, it's not like he's coming in and this is a functioning agricultural, village with like, surpluses of grain and sheep and things like that. And he's clawing his way. It's a city state. This is not a city state. This is the last
Right.
sad dregs of failed human civilization, a few people, right? So the
Right,
stakes
exactly.
are not that big in the grand
It
scheme of things
it can't
here.
possibly be going anywhere good.
Yeah.
And well the thing is like people have a point when they say like that yeah, Goldsmith should just tell them probably. But the thing is, and this is another thing I cut. People are going to say, "Oh, you cut so many things." What I was going to say at one point is like, look, Goldsmith has a point. Pretty much right after they see the computer, they destroy it. Okay, Goldsmith has a point. They're stupid, and that's the thing. It's like people go, oh, but democracy. Look, yes, I believe in democracy. I don't want to pretend. I'm not going to suggest anything otherwise. I believe in representative government, democracy. I also believe in a constitutional republic. I believe in like certain rules that people can't vote on because people are stupid. And the people in that town, when they see the computer, they don't even know what it is. He goes, "It's a machine." And this is how one of the ways Major French is more educated. He says it's a computer. He knows what it is, and he willingly tells them to destroy it, even though he knows what it is, and they destroy it. And so I think Goldsmith has a point. On the other hand, you can totally criticize him because he sets up this myth of the old man, which means it's like a basically like a father figure that tells you everything. And then this other guy shows up and he says, "I'm going to do the same thing, except I'm going to give you food." And so, in a way, he does set up the situation that happens. But I mean, as I've commented in the video, the French Revolution didn't happen for no reason. The people who were in charge at that time obviously screwed everything up, and the church wasn't doing great things either. So that is
Yeah, I
sort of
mean,
part of my
let's go
interpretation.
back to this question. Hollywood loves freedom, right?
Yeah,
So we've seen 1,000 movies, books adapted. I mean, people like the word freedom. It's a popular word, right? Like
right.
if you say I oppose freedom, you're almost always in a movie. If a character shows up and says I'm against freedom,
You're a bad guy.
they probably are keened as the bad guy. Okay. But in a society where you're starving, uh, freedom to eat, takes precedence over freedom of legislation,
Right.
And again, we've talked about this, and I'm sure this is a topic on many post-apocalyptic discussions, is like when basic survival is at stake, people will gravitate towards the power, the organization that gives them hope, at least, or guarantees them that basic survival for them and their children, right?
Right.
And that's in the hierarchy of needs, feeding your kids. Again, there's no kids. I mean, but just like basic living is
Hmm.
often more important to people than basic freedoms,
Right. Right.
other kinds of freedom. And so the problem is, I mean, I just want to take that moment there that you just said where they enter the cave. Okay. Now, Major French, whoever he is, I
Hmm.
mean, again, I think he's an imposter, but a clever one.
Yeah.
Um, he
Like a lot of
doesn't
like a lot of
have,
politicians.
yeah, but he doesn't have grand ambitions, because if
No.
he had grand ambitions, he
He'd
would
keep
have
the
at
computer.
least tried doing the following.
Oh, go ahead.
He would have said, okay, everybody get out, everybody out. And he would have gone up to the computer, maybe with Goldsmith there, and said,
Hmm.
okay, look, I get it. You're, master computer C74 Calculon X. Let's make a deal.
Right. Right.
You're pretty smart. You're pretty useful. I want to build an empire here. There's a lot of
Right.
scattered villages. People are hungry. With your knowledge and my action ability and my lead, because the reason you're hiding in a cave is because people wouldn't follow you if they knew who you were, right?
Right.
That was probably what was going on. The
Right.
computer assumed that people wouldn't follow a computer. They
I
need to
don't think the
follow a
computer made any
person.
decisions.
Yeah,
I
right.
personally do not think the computer made any of the decisions. It was Goldsmith's decision. The computer is a search engine, I think, like you're saying earlier. I don't think the computer thinks
I
for
don't know
itself.
that. That's a good theory. I just don't know from what we're told in the episode.
You're right.
But
You're
I'm
right.
just the only point I'm making is that French is a very, he's got very narrow blinders about his power.
Right.
He wants to have power over 12 people
He's
and eat
he's
well
closed-minded
for
and he
like
destroys something
6
that could
weeks.
help him. Yeah, he destroys
Yeah.
something that could actually help him. He's closed-minded
Yeah.
about what he's doing. Yeah.
If I were a power mad dictator and there was an all-knowing, powerful computer that I could have access to,
Yeah.
you know, sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Uh, let's make a deal here. Let's work it
There's
out.
there's something like that in like the third season of Westworld where they have like this big
Yeah.
ball-shaped computer that keeps the world from having destroying itself. And yeah, like that makes sense. And again, that's why you have to take it as a fable and not as a science fiction story. Because if you
Right.
take it as a science fiction story, it is kind of weird that he destroys it.
Yeah, but it makes sense within his. I mean, if again, the origin story of Major French, right, is
Yeah.
that he and those guys have been just sort of wandering around,
Yeah.
scamming when they could, running away when they met a stronger force, um, and
Speaking of
just
Fallout,
living month to month, basically,
we
right?
were talking about Fallout
Yeah.
in two, in episode two, and this is the same thing. They've been playing a game of Fallout, and then they got to this town. Yeah, like they've been surviving, shooting things in the
Yeah.
wild, and yeah,
They don't want to work hard.
yeah,
I mean, Major French says, we're going to be in charge and we're going to protect you from, I guess, the next group of scammers,
yeah,
who comes
right,
along.
right,
But they're not going to do backbreaking labor growing wheat and
no,
tending sheep.
right, right,
They just want to scam and get by, which is going to be a serious problem. If there's an apocalypse, is that again, I'm not sure most people who are not Mennonite and Amish, or work on ranches and farms, which is about 5 to 10, only 5 to 10% of the population now,
right,
understand how much work it takes to produce food for the rest of the population. And
right.
this episode is I think you put it really correctly. A lot of You can't call the Twilight Zone fantasy or science fiction. I think it's in that third category of fable. It's like you're around a campfire, and you're a tribal elder, and you're telling a story, and it's a
Exactly.
story that's removed in time and space. It's not filled in.
Yeah.
There's no fine detail. You have one smart aleck 8-year-old kid who's asking you, well, oh, well, granddad, what about the electricity for the computer? Shut up, kid. I'm telling you a story here. You're supposed to
Right.
learn from the story, right?
Right. Right. Just the computer worked. That's not the point. Keep listening.
Yeah,
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 exactly. Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, going back to, I mean, I'm not going to spoil the episode, but there's another episode with like a robot character and they get knocked over by a car and then they get up and they're fine. And and it's like, well, if I hit my PlayStation with a car, it's not going to be fine. But like, you just go, well, I get it. The idea is that it's a machine, so it's indestructible. And there are things like that in a lot of the episodes. I mean, that one's probably a bad example because that episode doesn't really work very well. But there's other episodes where it works really great. And I don't know, like in this one, that's not a problem for me. My problems with this episode are, like I said, the structure. I think if you change the structure a bit, it would work better as a story, and maybe fleshing out a little bit more, like you're saying, of the town. I think what you're describing, how it's hard to plant, hard to grow food, that makes sense because they can't do it. So, like,
Yeah, again, it's a fable, so they haven't done it. I mean, they probably could have done it, and in fact,
they've
a
tried.
really useful computer would have said, okay, now you guys need to start planting, 1/3 beans and 1/3 wheat, and here's how you go
Right,
get things like that, and go to the
right.
local farm and feed store, and there's
Yeah,
seeds, and like, where's your chickens? Where's the chickens? That's what really
they
gets
don't
me.
address any of the other stuff. They don't
Yeah,
address what kind of seeds they have, what the condition of the seeds are. Do they have livestock? They have a
yeah.
horse. Someone like in the comments was like, "Why don't they eat the horse?" I think they don't eat the horse because they're not going to get another horse. But that's like
Yeah,
the only. How
but
do they
they
have a
should be
horse? How's it
breeding
alive?
horses, right? I'm sorry to bring in science at this point, but there's a
No,
very
please.
interesting scientific discovery for those of us in Texas who are all obsessed with horses here. There was a scientific discovery recently, and you can go look it up. But these scientists identified the actual original domesticated horses, what they think are the first group of horses that only a few genes changed to make them from this wild animal. Like if there's a reason that the zebra, you don't see people riding zebras, right? Most wild equids are not tameable, right? But there was
Right.
just a couple of changes in some genes, possibly due to selective breeding, possibly due just to accident. And what was really interesting was within just a couple of 100 years, the horse stock DNA for like almost an entire continent changed because people figured out these are the horses we want to breed, the ones which will let us ride them, the ones that will let us pull a chariot, and the ones that will, take our plows, right? They were so
Right.
useful. My point is that the computer apparently has not been helping these people do anything for long-term survival. So the
Well,
computer
it's interesting
computer
you
we
say
go
that.
back to, let me just finish here. I'm sorry.
Sure, we got a
We,
comment, but
we
go
go
ahead.
went back to the beginning of like, this is not good versus evil. This is two semi-villains that both are not leading this community in the right direction. Except that one, you'd have probably more fun before you died out, and the other one, you'd live longer before you died out.
So,
There's
Professor,
no third choice.
you're pro Major French.
No, I'm just saying that like he's not the villain, and I mean, I honestly,
It's
this,
not black and white.
we'd love to have Rod Serling as a guest here, right? Because,
Oh yeah.
but then there's a problem with interviewing authors, right? Because the author may not be right about their own work.
Right.
I don't
This
believe
is
that
a
the
perspective.
author should be the last word on anybody on creativity, right? I mean,
Right.
especially since a lot of authors are dead, right? And so you
Right.
can't
I mean, they
ask them.
can't be. Yeah.
Yeah. And we should have the right to interpret something that is not the exact same interpretation of the author.
Absolutely. That's what my videos are. I have no idea if Rod Serling read The Man on Horseback, which is a great classic book, and I recommend everyone read it. It's very easy to read. I got it off Amazon. I have no idea if he read it, but you know what? He probably knew all of the things that are in it.
Right, because those themes were in the culture. So to answer your question, I would not follow if I were in that community after a couple of months or years, I would go, listen, this old man in the cave is not helping us long term.
Right.
Or maybe he's
Right.
not being given the right search terms. He's not being, I mean,
That's what I think it
yeah,
is.
yeah.
That's right. So not so fast. And then in is that parentheses? I don't know what you call those squiggles, but in Joni says the old man was giving them warnings about the food and soil, where to plant and what to eat. It's as if it annualized for them, kept them safe with warnings or advice. So that's an interesting idea. I think that Goldsmith was asking it questions, and the reason I think he was asking it questions is because if the old man just constantly spews information, how do you get specific information about specific areas? Like, is the soil okay? So and maybe that's not what you're saying. I mean, I'm confused exactly what annualized means. Do you know what that refers to, Professor?
No, I mean, I'm wondering if it's an agricultural term. We got to ask ChatGPT.
I'm gonna Google it. I'm gonna use Google because they have their own AI, but and I hate
But
that. But
I mean, this person raises another really interesting question, which again, I'm sure came up in 1963 as much as it came up in
uh,
1973 when I watched this.
right.
Uh, is that how does the computer know this? What sensors
Uh,
does it have? Is the old man like bringing soil samples to the computer and putting it in like
and this
I'm old enough to remember the Viking lander that landed on Mars and sent
right,
in little shovels and analyzed the samples of air and soil, and we've done that with other probes since then. So
right.
again, this wasn't filled out by the episode, but we're assuming that the computer doesn't have like drones flying around and sampling the
Oh,
soil.
he meant sorry, he or she, I'm not sure. Sorry,
Yeah,
she, Joni, what I'm thinking.
yeah.
Said meant to analyze. She misspelled it. Well, it
Yeah.
was a
Okay.
misspelling
So
because I clearly can't type. Sorry.
that's what I
Sorry.
interpreted her to mean there is that how does the analysis take place? If the computer can do that, if I can take a little sample of soil and drop it in the socket in the computer, and it says, yeah, this soil is not irradiated, you can grow things there, that's very helpful, right?
Yeah, exactly. But I do think we're meant to think that he enters a question and it gives him an answer. That's what I
But
think
how does
from
the
what we
computer
get.
get the data? You were talking about, I mean, we don't have intelligent computers yet. We have learning models. And
Yeah,
as you
yeah.
know, all data, all output
Two
has to come from good input or it's
two
crappy, right? So
answers.
like what is the input, right?
I have two answers to that. The
Yeah,
first answer is the one we've already given, which is it's a fable. Don't worry about it.
yeah.
That's my first. The second answer, though, if we're actually going to try to be logical, which I think there is some logic in this episode, the second answer is I think that we are meant to believe that he can type in basically the general area of the dirt and that the thing can just tell him that. And the thing about that is that sounds ridiculous in 1964, but it doesn't sound ridiculous in 2025, not to me, because we've got AI and stuff that can do things kind of like that. If you ask an AI, what's the soil like in the Midwest in this specific state? They can probably tell you that. Now, those states exist. This is post-apocalyptic. It'd be different. I think it's literally just supposed to be he somehow knows what to ask it and it knows the answer. Like we're supposed to
Yeah.
accept that. And it's but you're right. He wouldn't know longitude and latitude, would he? Like,
Well, okay, in the 2 hour movie that this would be
yeah, yeah.
expanded to, the computer still is connected to Earth satellites and
Hmm.
can scan soil and say
That's what I
that
was
this
going to
soil,
say is internet. So
Yeah,
when
I
I say
mean,
it's easier to answer in
satellites,
2025,
satellites, internet. I mean, today, I mean, actually, this would be a fun thing to remake, right? Uh,
yes,
Maybe fill out the plot or something like that.
I think
But
it's perfect for
in
a
the
remake.
fable, the computer. Now let's go to your theory. Okay, so as people know, in the ancient world, there were oracles, like the famous Oracle at Delphi, and
Right.
people would go to the oracle, you know, and they pay a fee, and they would ask a priestess, usually a priestess, sometimes a priest, to ask the god or the gods to interpret and give them, like, should I sail
Oh,
on Thursday to go do pick up some stone and papyri in Alexandria? Is the weather going to be good? Am I going to everything be okay? Or should I invade this other empire? I mean, big questions, small questions. People ask, should I get
right,
married to this man, whatever?
right,
And the priestess would speak in the voice of the god and give an answer, right?
right.
And, we are not going to assume other people didn't have faith as much as we did. So maybe the priestess thought that they were hearing from a god and gave an
Right.
honest answer in the smoke of the cave. They talked about the gases in the cave, and they probably, were on a high, or something like that. But in any case, this is very similar to that. A cave where you go ask questions of supposedly of a higher being. It's Wizard of Oz, based on the very same premise. I mean, this is a
Right.
retelling of the Wizard of Oz story in some way, right?
I mean,
Uh,
possibly. That's
yeah,
an interesting.
yeah,
That's an interesting perspective. I like that. I
yeah. I
well,
mean,
so
the curtain comes down, and it's not, it's not who you expect it to
it's
be. Yeah,
gotcha. That makes a
yeah,
lot of
yeah,
sense. Well, so
yeah.
I was gonna say real quick. I wonder what you think of this because we've talked about remakes and like what you would do if it was remade today. And I think if this was remade today, not if I remade it, but I think if it was remade today, I think what they would do if they were clever, they would move the story forward. And instead, Goldsmith is gone. Maybe he's dead. The military guys are the ones currently in charge of the town when someone else gets there. And what it is Major French has turned the computer into his personal ATM because he says, "Oh, you want to know this or that? give me some wheat, give me some something." And the new version is stop believing in this god. It's bad to believe that. That would be the new version, I think. What do you think?
Well, I want to talk about a movie that was actually produced by Kevin Costner. He wasn't in it.
Okay.
The actor Elia Morales was in it, and nobody else saw it, I think, except me. Which dealt with a very similar theme. And this goes back to this idea of like freedom versus security. Okay.
Mhm, mhm.
The film that I'm talking about is called Rapa Nui,
Okay.
and it is based on older interpretations of what happened at Easter Island before
Mm,
contact with Europeans.
right.
Again, modern archaeology tells a different story, but in the previous interpretation was that Easter Island was this paradise of gigantic trees, very lush. Human beings came and settled there, and they built a remarkable civilization, these giant moa, for example. But in this old narrative, they destroyed themselves because they cut down every single tree. There's hardly any trees there at all on Easter Island. And they
Right.
impoverished the soil, trying to, propping up priests who interpreted the gods and told them to build these giant Moa statues. And they destroyed their own environment. Now today, most archaeologists will tell a different story that the people of Easter Island. I mean, I'll let people look up more recent. But in the film Rapa Nui, you have a young man who is rebelling against an oppressive conservative society where the priests tell everybody what to do and constrict their freedom. So, in terms of a plot, this is exactly what you like, right? I mean, who isn't in favor of the young man rebelling against the oppressive
Hmm.
society of the old people, right?
Right,
There's never
right,
been a movie made where the old people rebel against the evil young people
right.
who are oppressing them. That's
Which
not
would
going to be a Hollywood plot.
it's really funny because there was an episode of The Twilight Zone that Rod Serling wanted to make for years about a world where they eliminated old people. So, but
Yeah. And the last old people rebel against the youthocracy, you know.
I don't think that happened in the episode, but that would have been funny.
Yeah. So anyway,
But
in
so
this
this
film,
movie,
and I'm
yeah,
giving away this movie. I'm spoiling this movie. I'm sorry.
I want to watch it.
It's
Sounds
not
good.
that great a movie. It's well done, like
Oh, okay, never
in terms of like the costume and
mind.
everything. But in this, the rebellion is successful.
Hmm,
The young man leads a rebellion, and they overthrow the priest kings, the conservative society. They tear down the Moa, which did happen. I mean, the Moa, most of the Moa, when they were discovered by Europeans, had been pushed over. You know, the gods had been rebelled against and
right,
destroyed, just like the old man in the cave. Okay.
right.
And in the movie, though, nothing replaces the old aristocracy oppressiveness, but anarchy,
Mm,
cannibalism, murder, everybody
ooh,
running around killing each other, horrible crimes. And
right,
so this is this uh, juxtaposition we find ourselves is, do you want civilization which implies not just freedoms but order and
right,
discipline,
right,
right? Or do you value freedom so much that you're willing to give up discipline and order?
right.
And I think the episode is a fable about these choices, but it doesn't make them like a lot of fables make the answers clear. What
Hmm.
I think is interesting about this one is the answer is not clear, because if you just read this story, you know, you're telling this story to anyway, your group of post-apocalyptic survivors around, you know, think about it. Post-apocalypse 30 years from now, people are going to be telling Twilight Zone stories as if they really happened. You
Right,
know, yeah. I
exactly.
mean,
Yeah,
100 years from now, people will say, "Yes, in my day, the great Harry Potter defeated the Voldemort in New York
right.
on the stock exchange during the Biden administration when the Russians fought the Vietnamese." I mean, you know, we're going to
People are going to
mix
mix
up
things
all
up,
of these
probably.
things,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So
probably.
so in the fable, it would have been much more clear. But I think what Rod Serling did here, and I don't know whether it was fully conscious, is he made it sort of, he showed the complexity of like who's a good guy and a bad guy, and what is the right thing to do in these kind of
What's a
situations. There's
right?
no clear answer.
What's a revolution? What's a coup? What's the difference between the two of them? There's a one last thing I'll say, and then we can kind of wrap it up because I know we're getting to an hour here. Is and you could say whatever you want after this, but the last thing I want to comment is during the Bolivarian Revolution in Venezuela, when Bolivar himself, I think it was him, Simon Bolivar, he crept into the room of the guy who was the current leader of Venezuela at the time. I forget his name, and they were going to arrest him and turn him over to the Spanish because he wasn't radical enough. And when he saw them approaching, he famously said, "Chaos and confusion. All you people know how to do is make noise." And that's another thing I almost put in the video because that's kind of what I think of when I watch this episode. But
Yeah,
yeah,
that's actually a great example. There are two cynical takes on all fast social change. Cynical take number one was stated by Simon Bolivar. He said making revolution in Latin America was like plowing the sea.
yes, that's a great. I remember that quote. That's a great
Yeah.
quote.
So he was saying that, like, and this is, you know, the Who song, the Meet the New Boss. He's the same as the old boss, right? And there've been a lot
Right.
of movies where, and it's in the 20th century, not to mention the French Revolution, there've been many revolutions where you wonder whether it was worth it, right? I mean, the
Right.
revolution changed certain things for the better. I mean, we like in the French Revolution, you know, we sort of like the idea of the rights of man, and
Hmm.
that human beings have certain inalienable. I mean, the American Revolution, uh, you know, you could argue it was one of the few revolutions that didn't set off a cycle of violence 60 times
It's
before that.
crazy.
And yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, there was violence in America. There was violence
Right, right,
against enslaved people, for example, to keep them
right,
enslaved. I mean, so it
right.
wasn't like a everybody lived happily ever after.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
but so there's the cynical take, which is that revolution is just the trading of one group of oppressive leaders for another, but with
Mm.
different slogans, different flags, different,
Maybe slightly more freedom.
ideologies, right?
Yeah.
And then the second cynical take is that revolutions just don't think through what will actually help people, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the Soviets came to Bolsheviks came to power in Russia with the slogan of peace, bread, and land. And for quite a number of years, first of all, everybody's land got taken away from them.
I was gonna say
There
they
was
lost all
mass
three.
starvation for at least 15, 20 years.
Right.
Uh, there was, I mean, you can't say necessarily that Imperial Russia had fewer wars than Bolshevik Russia, but like there
No,
wasn't
no.
necessarily peace.
I
So
mean, they had the
revolutions
Liturga.
inherently have these kinds of problems, and I think this
Right.
episode sort of deals with some of those complexities. That's my take.
Exactly. Yeah. And I was originally more general in my review in my writing, but I wanted to narrow it down just because every time I would branch out to another thing, it wasn't specific enough. And the French Revolution was the only one that felt specific enough that I was like, I'll throw that. But I hoped that people would take that and kind of extrapolate that to other revolutions as well. Which is why I bring in military intervention as a concept in general. But in any case, thank you so much for joining us. I know you probably have to get going, right? It's been like an hour.
Well, yeah, we could wrap up. I had a question for you because
Sure.
you did a really great analysis, and I hope
Thank
people
you.
have got a chance to watch it before this, or will get the chance to watch it. And one of the many reasons I'm honored and enjoy spending time with you is that,
Oh,
as
thanks,
you
man.
know, I teach at a university, and I love talking to the students who are they're young, and so many of the content, media, books, movies, films, television, games. Some of them are new because, like, a new game just came out this week or something like that, right?
Right.
Or a new television show just came out last week. So they're seeing it for the first time. I'm seeing something different than them because I am seeing that, oh, this is a great movie, but and and it's also reminiscent of these 12 other movies that I saw
Right.
first in the 1970s and these three stories that I read from the 1940s and something an English philosopher wrote in 1700.
Right.
So I'm interested in your take on this particular society here in this town. If you were someone like you who has I mean, actually in your situation, you've just gotten married. You're looking forward to a long life of love and happiness together. The apocalypse happens. Okay?
Mm.
What are your priorities for the society? If like you and your wife and your family have a choice about what kind of society that they can live in that would be survivable long term for the kids that you're going to have and the grandkids, what are you looking for when you're shopping around for a post-apocalyptic society with some of the evidence that's given from us from this episode, but we can even throw in going back to the episode 2 with Charles Bronson and Elizabeth Montgomery.
If so assuming that I'm going from community to community, looking for one that's right for my home, let's paint that picture. Assuming that's the case, I look for two things. One would be a way to protect themselves. So maybe like a huge gate or maybe lots of guns. But if you have lots of guns, does that leads to the second thing? How does the power structure flow? Who's actually in charge? Do people, individuals in that place have rights to do whatever they basically want to do within reason? Or is it, and I think this would be most societies, basically a military dictatorship where the guys who have the guns at the top tell everybody else what to do? I wouldn't want to be in that society because I'm seeing Jim Jones, and that's exactly what happens here with Major French. Now, I don't think I'd want to live in Goldsmith's town either, because the computer tells you what you can't do. The computer doesn't tell you what you can do. The computer doesn't give you inspiration. It doesn't make speeches. It doesn't give you leadership. There's no leader. What does Goldsmith even do besides tell them what they can? We don't see him do anything besides that. So I I would, here's my honest answer. I'd want to live in that cave. I would want to get inside that cave, have control of the door, and then I only leave my little vault when I can go get food and come back in. I would want to live on my own with my family in a place where I knew was safe, because The Walking Dead, which got everything it believes from Night of the Living Dead, taught us, as Night of the Living Dead taught us, you can't trust other people. You just can't. So that's my, I guess, is that an answer? Is that good? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I want to find a society where there is order and discipline, but not psychotically so,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I want to go back to this novel. Maybe I'll end on this novel that I recommend people reading. It's on my top 20 list of post-apocalyptic novels.
Mm,
Graybeard by Brian Aldiss. And
excellent.
to some extent, they're doing what I just described, is that there's a central group, three people, and they spend time in different post-apocalyptic situations. One of them is sort of a tin pot dictator type. He wasn't
Mm,
anybody important before the fall, but
right.
he's very cunning and clever, and he's trying to keep power. By the way, his power base is Oxford, England, and his clerks surrounding himself are like professors of history at Oxford. So
That's
he's
great.
smart enough to surround himself with other smart people who he can use to do
Right.
certain things.
Right.
But then he's also ruthless in keeping order in a society that's falling apart. And
Right.
I think that that's the real challenge. And the problem is that it's almost impossible to depict that in movies and television. And bringing in here The Last of Us, and we haven't done our Last of Us show, but like in The Last of Us, I don't know if you've seen both seasons of The Last of Us or not, but like
I haven't
people,
seen season
yeah,
two, but I'm aware of the content of it
yeah,
because I've watched so many YouTube
yeah.
videos crapping on it.
But let's talk about season one. Um, there are a lot of parallels to, again, we mentioned how the episode two was a progenitor for a lot of post-apocalyptic television and movies, the
Right.
situation there. And then
Right.
this episode two, you can see its influence in a lot of
Yeah.
there. In The
It's
Last of
referenced in
Us,
a lot of cartoons and stuff, actually. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. In The Last of Us, they're wandering around as a number of different societies, and the show just has trouble depicting how you balance law and order, discipline,
Right.
uh, correction of like crimes,
Hmm.
and freedom
Yeah.
there. And I think that that's one that in books, for some reason, it's easier to resolve this in books where you can do a lot of exposition and
Yes.
discussion, but portrayal in movies, we just seem to lean so hard into freedom.
Hmm.
And there's this one moment in The Last of Us that I think was unintentionally hilarious. The protagonists are in a community, and this community is supposed to be, I don't know whether it's ideal, but like
Is
it's
this the
supposed to be a
first
community.
season?
The first season, yeah,
I know
where
what
they
you're
go
talking
to
about.
the Wyoming community, and their freedom, right? They're the freedom community, and
Hmm.
they're having a tour, and the person giving them the tour says, "And this is our religious center, interfaith, of course." And I I
How?
just laughed at that point, which there's
How?
nothing wrong with having an interfaith center, but I felt
Sure.
like it was the television writers assuring us
Yeah.
that like this community was an interfaith community, right? And
It was
just
perfect.
again, there's just television and movies have trouble dealing with the concept of freedom or order in anything but simplistic terms.
Yes.
So I
Yes.
appreciate Rod Serling, even though we were told essentially a simple fable, it had a
Hmm.
lot of complexity to it
Right.
back in the
Exactly.
60s.
Exactly. I totally agree with that. And that's one of the reasons I made a video about it. I love that it wasn't just sure, bad guy, good guy. I agree with you that it's more black. It's not black and white, even though shot in black and white, it's not black and white. And that's kind of what's so interesting about it. Um, we definitely will do another one of these soon. Thank you so much for joining me this time. Before we go, I want to ask you just real quick while we're talking. You have you seen much of the original Outer Limits?
Yeah, I've watched all the original Outer Limits, and then I also watched the excellent 1980s Outer Limits, which unfortunately is there. I was
1990s,
just
but
on
yeah.
an online discussion forum about this. Yeah, 1990s. Yeah, for some, unfortunately, the original shows from the 1960s look great because they
Hmm.
shot on film,
Yeah.
and then these films have been transferred to either high definition or now or Blu-ray or now 4K. But
Yeah.
in the 80s and 90s, they shot on videotape, and there's just a lot of bad versions. But like, yes, The Outer Limits
Yeah.
was my actually. I think I like The Outer Limits more than I in some episodes more than I did the when I was a kid. Like 10 years
It's
old. But
it's interesting the difference between the two stylistically. Would you like to do an episode soon, a live stream soon, talking about the Outer Limits or a specific episode of the Outer Limits?
uh, let's do all the Outer. Yeah,
Yeah,
they
awesome.
were. Yeah, and also the difference because they were moral storytellers too. They were fable tellers too. I think they were more interested. I mean, they were more interested in the entertainment value than
Yeah,
maybe the Twilight Zone was. I mean, there was a monster of
yeah,
the week, type of
yeah.
thing there,
The short,
but they
the
still told
short,
moral fables.
the short version that I would give people
Yeah,
real quick is that the Outer Limits was more like the late night movies that you would have back then at like 1 a.m. or whatever. There'd be some black and white B science fiction or monster movie. That's more of the Outer Limits than the Twilight Zone. The Twilight Zone is more nested
yeah,
in the heritage of like literature of short fiction, and and the Outer Limits is more like a movie. But
yeah.
but there's more to it than that. But hey, look, awesome. That's a great place to leave off. I'll contact you between and let's start doing a thing on the Outer Limits because I think that'd be fun.
And best wishes for marrying that human.
Thank you. It will my wedding is actually going to be on October 30th because we're such Halloween nuts that we want to get married the day before. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And I love talking to you, man. This is always fun.
Thank you. Take care, sir.
Take care. See here. And I'm going to go ahead and sign off now to any of you watching. So thank you so much for everybody and everybody watching this and everybody watching it later. You